Welcome to the ATP Project. You're with your hosts, Matt, Steve, and Jeff. G'day, guys.
How you going?
We're talking about asthma today, or as Steve wanted to call it, leaving you breathless. I'm so glad that you don't get to choose.
Oh, no, it's
seriously.
I've got a very low talent in making up names.
So the leaving you breathless.
Leaving us
Steve.
breathless.
Yeah, that's you don't get to name them.
No,
Steve-o.
I'm banned. I'm restricted. I understand that.
Yeah.
But it is funny because asthma is on the increase, which is weird because it's considered sort of has got a genetic basis. Now genes don't change that much, so the fact that it's on the increase is really quite strange. I mean, we kind of know why, but it's really a product of the modern environment, isn't it, Matt? You about the hygiene hypothesis?
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, though, we need to break it down specifically.
We do.
What is asthma? I mean, I know that it's an issue with regards to oxygen transfer in the lungs. Would that be correct?
Oh, not so much transfer. It's to do with the bronchioles, which are the tubes that lead to the little tiny things called the alveoli in the end of the lungs where the oxygen transfer takes place. So it's the tubes getting to the alveoli, which are the little parts.
And what do they restrict? Close up?
They do three things. They constrict. There's bronchospasm, which is the muscular thing. And then there's secretion of mucus there. And then there's also inflammation there. So there's three parts to the bronchial problems. And so they all have different pathophysiologies. And, unfortunately with medications nowadays, there's some that treat just one of them, like everyone knows what a puffer is, don't they? Yeah. That's a beta-2 adrenergic agent, which stimulates the beta receptors, which is like the adrenaline receptors in the bronchioles, which just dilate the bronchioles. Doesn't affect the mucus per se, but it just dilates the bronchioles. So you get more air in and you don't die. So they're not bad.
Yeah.
But before that, in the 1920s, they developed, they synthesized adrenaline. They used to just inject people with adrenaline.
Wow.
Hey, you know, interesting story about that sequence of events?
Yeah.
So after they did the injections of adrenaline, they realised that they could induce the same adrenal activation by injecting caffeine.
Yes.
And so what they started doing, they did this very interesting trial where they injected aminophylline into people's butt cheeks to dilate the bronchioles. And an interesting side effect they noticed in that trials was at the injection site in the butt cheeks, all the fat disappeared. And that was the initial research that led to the ability for transdermal caffeine targeting subcutaneous fat tissue. So that's where the aminophylline-based theory of caffeine to treat cellulite came from. Yeah, right. It was actually a trial injecting caffeine for asthma.
Yeah, right.
I
love it.
The asthmatics out there know that if you're ever in really big trouble and no puffers or anything around, you make a strong black coffee and you can get a similar dilation into the bronchioles and that sort of stuff.
Well, ephedra as well too. I mean,
and that was at Ma Wang, was the traditional Chinese medicine treatment for asthma, which is pseudoephedrine,
which obviously helps.
And that was published in the 1500s. So they've known about it for a long time. They drunk this stuff and their asthma improved. They didn't know why, or they didn't know about adrenaline and adrenergic receptors. But that's what adrenaline does. It does some great. It breaks down fat, as you mentioned. It also, when you're running, you want your bronchioles to dilate to get more oxygen in. That's what it does.
And the side effect of the systemic adrenaline and caffeine, though, was palpitations and heart stress.
Yeah.
So that's why now they make them into a puffer.
Yeah.
So that way you can activate the adrenal receptors in the bronchioles. And as it's constricted, you get a bigger dose there. And then locally it works.
Well, it's funny, and we were just talking about this the other day as a side note. Like, I'm wearing my heart monitor now with doing more running, Steve.
Yes.
Fit for football.
Good on you.
And my resting heart rate at the moment is a shameful about 65 because I'm not particularly fit. But it was down to in the high 40s, my resting heartbeat last year when I was playing football. So I mean, that's pretty good. As soon as I have a coffee, my heart beats per minute jumps about 20 beats per minute.
Yeah.
Just having a coffee.
Yeah. So that's why they put those compounds into the local sprays. So to avoid the heart, avoid the adrenals, and get it into the directly into the bronchioles. So what Steve was saying, basically with asthma, these are the main things you got to look at. Some things can create the muscles to spasm and cramp. Okay, we'll talk about what does that, but that's a part of asthma. They're typically the people that'll spontaneously just get this wheezing and this tightness, and they're constantly needing to cough, but there's nothing productive. They're just having this little, they feel this need to constantly do that sort of stuff because they're not getting adequate air, and that's a sign of bronchoconstriction, and that's the one that the Ventolin can quickly open up. Alternatively, if you get inflammation into the mucus associated with a flu or an infection or something, or an allergy or an overgrowth of a parasite anywhere in the body, you can get inflamed mucous membranes. And of course, with inflamed mucous membranes, they swell. So the swelling of that membrane then can also narrow the tubes. So if you have a swollen, inflamed membrane and then you get bronchial constriction, you get an aggravated thing. Then the third aspect is just straight out obstruction with phlegm. and catarrh or snot or whatever you want to call it. And what happens there is you just get a bulk amount of mucus that coats the area, and then you have some problems. So I'm going to try to hopefully today help people work out which one is them, because the symptom picture for each looks very different. Yeah. So it's very obvious, if someone's got massive amounts of catarrh, like phlegm and crap sitting in the lower lungs, just congestion in the lower lungs, they're rattly, they're coughy, they're wheezy. It's worse when they lie down because it starts to fall up their chest, and so they're the sort of people that they're not so bad when they're going, but as soon as they lie down and postural changes, they suddenly get it. Big link in with that also with acidic mucus and gut reflux and that sort of stuff. So you'll find these people will have will have a build-up of mucus the whole way through the digestive tract, tendency to looser stools, tendency to indigestion, tendency to heartburn, gastroesophageal reflux, and then they have this constant rattling in the chest, which they can actually, they know there's some stuff in there. The doctors will listen to on the back of their chest and listen to them breathing and hear the tacky stuff rattle. So if that's you. If some of the people that have the inflamed mucus but not a stupid amount of phlegm and slime in their lungs, one of the key features of that is sensitive to temperature changes. So what happens is someone's got a layer of inflamed mucus, so a bit of a layer of mucus across their mucosa with an inflamed, swollen membrane. As cold air comes in, the mucus actually gets cold. The temperature changes in the mucus quite quickly. So then what happens is the body goes, right, well, if we constrict the bronchioles and we compress the air, what happens is we're going to heat it and we're going to create moisture, which is going to, because cold, dry air is a bad thing for asthma, because the only way the body can protect you from cold, dry air is through bronchial constriction and mucus production, because it wants to heat the air and add a bit of moisture to it, so that way it works better on our lungs. With the bronchioconstriction people, usually you'll find these people, it'll be just a spontaneous thing. Common with sport-induced asthma and that sort of stuff as well. Yep. But they'll get this spontaneous. There won't be catarrh, there won't be rattling, but they'll have this wheeze. You'll hear the friction and you'll hear the resistance in their breathing as their air's trying to fit through these constricted bronchioles. And typically, one of the ways they confirm the constriction is by the treatment. So, for example, if it's relieved with a Ventolin spray, which is salbutamol, is that?
Yeah.
So if it's relieved by that, then it's a bronchoconstriction. Or if coffee does make a big difference and that sort of stuff, then that it's a bronchoconstriction more than an inflammation.
Can I just tell you a very quick funny story about the butanols, the class of drugs? Yeah. When I first started working here, this is 2 years ago, I found out that a lot of athletes were taking clenbuterol, which is an anti-asthma drug.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's for horses mainly, but in some countries it's for humans too.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not FDA approved, but in some countries it's an S4. And I thought, what the bloody hell are all these athletes? They're great, they've got asthma and they're competing really well. and I was telling Els this the other day, and when I found out what they're taking it for,
fat loss
and muscle gain, it's a non-steroidal way of doing it. I went, really? I didn't know that. And so these uses of these drugs, that you were talking about injections in the butt, and it just amazes me that there's such innovation they understand pathophysiology, it does this, and they use these drugs for different purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, like, the cool thing about bodybuilders really is that they are right on the cutting edge of experimental science, and they're not afraid to use themselves. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes we've seen things go to the extreme, but they are very smart. A lot of them really have worked out, obviously, what's going on with the pharmacokinetics.
Pharmacodynamics,
and how that works.
There's a lot of trial and error. Like, you got to realise too that there are processes that have been in practice for over 20 years. And I've been talking to a couple of our athletes about, for example, growth hormone and insulin interactions and thyroid interactions, and finding out that the standard protocols, it's actually, the new research shows that the thyroid growth hormone interaction, it looks like it's been done wrong, but it's still being done that way. But they get great data out of it. You get great data, but man, I tell you what, there's some big opportunities. And the reason why there's bugger all information on this sort of stuff is because there seems to be this weird concept in orthodox medicine that you can't prevent disease. You got to wait till they got the disease and then give them the cholesterol medication or diabetic medication. But if they use the tools that they had in the medical practice to actually control body composition, you could prevent that stuff. Yep. But they seem to think prevention through body composition with hormonal manipulation and metabolism manipulation and that sort of stuff is wrong and evil. but waiting for someone to get fat and sick and then giving them a cholesterol medication for the rest of their life, or a lap band surgery or diabetic medication for the rest of their life, is responsible and good.
Yeah,
I just can't under that. And the funny thing is it's a big jump to get from where they are most of the time to where we're thinking, because they can't even get their head around it.
Well, it's worse.
But it's wrong.
Absolutely. You know? It even gets worse now with joint surgeries where Dr. Doug does. If their knees aren't bad enough, they reject them for surgery. So come back in a year and we'll check if it's worse and we'll repair it then.
Yeah.
You know, these sort of things, I don't like that philosophy. I'd rather say, hey, why don't you help repair the joint with simple glucosamine or something, whatever they want to pick, Boswellia or anything.
No, we'll make it get worse. We've got to wait. We've got to wait for it to get worse because I'm a surgeon.
Yes.
It's quite.
The cut is secure.
So that's the trick of asking a surgeon a question. The answer is surgery.
I wanted to throw something in really quickly. My nephew has asthma, but the interesting thing is that he actually develops a little cough. And the real scary thing is that my sister-in-law, his mum, used to say to the teachers, look, if he develops a cough, call me straight away because, obviously this can lead into something quite bad. Yeah, teachers leave him for a whole day. Oh, yeah, he's had a bad cough. Lift him the whole day. Winds up in hospital effectively that night and for the whole of the next day.
Yeah.
So these symptoms are really important, I think, for people to understand, so even if it's not yourself.
And get on quickly.
Yeah, get it quick.
Yes. And I'll show you some tricks too.
Treated, so.
But asthma, like seriously, every one of us in this room and everyone listening will have a story relating to asthma. Me personally, that was the reason why I became a naturopath. From apparently my whole childhood that I don't remember, I was in hospital, a lot of it with asthma and eczema, up until the ages of 7 and that sort of stuff. It was a big problem for me, and the medication that I was used, that created a lot of long-term health complications, and even the other little things, like the simple fact that the doctors say that your asthma is triggered by dairy, but if you don't have calcium, you're going to get osteoporosis. So let's keep you on the dairy. We'll manage your treatment with prednisone, and then you end up with osteoporosis from the prednisone. And if you spend your whole life chasing calcium, which you realise that it was in all the other foods other than dairy anyway. I could have the broccoli, the nuts and the seeds and all the other alternatives would have been adequate supplies of dairy for that. But that's a common thing. So calcium, So you see that this insistence of having the milk from another animal and that sort of stuff is a big thing for other children to understand. And in my instance, I reacted badly to lactose. It created a lot of inflammation and just straight out phlegm and mucus. So what they did then is they said, oh, well, cow's milk is a big problem for you. What we'll do, we'll switch you over to goat's milk. Well, goat's milk has got the same amount of lactose in it, except it tastes like a stinky ass of a weird animal. They make you drink that all the time.
It does come from a weird animal.
Man, seriously, I can't even... The wife bought a goat's milk soap the other day, and I'm in the shower having freaking out, going, this reminds me of hospital.
That's
told you about those canapes that I got watching that.
The canapes.
We got there and Tony and I absolutely starving and going around with a plate of canapes and we're hoeing them down they're basically inhaling them. We're not even in because we went to see Cirque du Soleil. They came around and they gave us this new one and we grabbed that. It's like, I'm putting it into the mouth and I'm chewing it. I'm going, that's not right. That's just not good. And Tony and I both sort of looking at each other and I said, you know what that tastes like? It tastes like I've just licked a goat's sweaty back. Yeah. And Tony spat this thing out. Anyway, I can't stand that.
That happened to me first time we went to America from Australia, 14-hour flight for anyone that's never done it. And then they brought out hey, would you like a little quickie? And I've said to the hostie, hell yeah.
Hang on.
And then I realised it was a quiche.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, good.
And then, but it was made with goat's cheese. And I just nailed it. And I'm just like, boom. And I actually had to spit it out and hide it.
Goat's cheese, but duck eggs is probably your thing.
Oh, duck eggs, instant vomit.
Anyway, so the little boy that my little one's just started prep this year, which is sort of before grade 1.
That's awesome.
And one of the other friends that we've become, one of the other kids' parents that we've become friends with is a doctor, and talking about how bad kids are with eating, and goes, I'm really worried about my boy because all he's eating at the moment is lots of protein, meats, fruits, and vegetables, and he won't touch his milk or his bread. Just like
what we're trying to do with that.
It's so funny.
That's the holy grail.
It's crazy.
Well, it's a great segue into because there is a sex difference when kids get asthma. More boys get asthma when they're young, but actually more girls get post-puberty asthma.
Yeah,
because there's a sex difference, and it's very interesting because boys' lungs develop a lot slower than girls' lungs, and also they have narrower bronchioles when they're growing, so they are more prone to asthma. They don't really know why, but they know that puberty, testosterone is highly protective against asthma.
And we've also seen that within the menstrual cycles, a lot of women that suffer from asthma, and different stages of the menstrual cycle will flare up. Typically in the first half of the menstrual cycle, they experience more asthma. And then getting towards the premenstrual stages when their bronchioles free up. So what we're finding, the link that we're seeing is estrogen. Estrogen is proliferative straight away. So the higher estrogen in the early life, that's why women develop faster, because estrogen's the most anabolic thing. It can grow you faster. But what actually happens with estrogen when it continues to do that is it increases mast cell degranulation, which basically means your immune cells are more likely to release chemicals like histamine. They're more likely to release allergic inflammation. And the allergic inflammation is what causes the bronchial constriction, and it also causes the mucus generation. So estrogen amplifies that. So another thing that happens around menopause and typically perimenopause is about 5 to 10 years before the estrogen drops, the androgens drop. So progesterone usually drops first. So coming into menopause, as their progesterone drops, all of a sudden they can start getting asthma. And so you'll often see the diagnoses of asthma, like Steve was saying, post-puberty, more in the women, and the blokes seem to start to disappear. You know, like they always talk about blokes in 7-year cycles and that sort of stuff. Where the first 7 years are in trouble, and then the next 7 years it seems to even out. And then when we hit puberty, things change again. So 14 to 21, and then so asthma. There's always this weird ass story about the 7-year cycles with asthma, where it can be there for 7 years, disappear for 7. It's a strange little process, but I don't understand it totally. But with the hormones, that's what you'll find, because they've even finding big links now with oral contraceptive pills, HRTs, anabolic steroids, exogenous treatments. So the androgens actually protect and offset the estrogen's ability to be bronchoconstrictive and the estrogen's ability to create mucus. And the androgens mainly that they talk about is progesterone and testosterone. But a pretty cool little treatment strategy that they're researching now is DHEA. DHEA is an androgen.
Which is banned here.
Oh, unless you get a doctor's prescription. Yeah. But what I used to do in my naturopath clinic is I used to measure the ratios between cortisol and DHEA to look for adrenal status. And what you'd find, for example, cortisol and DHEA both come from the adrenal cortex, and they're both made from exactly the same stuff. The difference is cortisol is anti-inflammatory, but is also immune suppressant. Okay? DHEA is anti-inflammatory, but can actually support the anti-infectious immune system and reduce allergic inflammation. So DHEA as an androgen is very powerful. But if you look at the ratios between cortisol and DHEA, usually the best time to do it is a blood test or a saliva test first thing in the morning, 8 a.m. Salivas are best if you want to look at cortisol, because you don't get that white coat syndrome, unless you're nervous about doing your test at home and you're giving it to yourself. But cortisol DHEA ratios are very interesting, because if you look at the immune seesaw, the immune system being like a seesaw, one side kills infections, the other side flushes allergies. If the immune seesaw is polarized, where your anti-infectious defense is down and your allergic inflammation is up, and by the way, don't let me forget to come back to this, because this is how we're born. We're born with no anti-infectious defense and only allergic inflammation. And we're born sterile. And as we fill up with bugs, we're supposed to increase our anti-infectious, and our allergic inflammation is supposed to disappear. And the whole problem with asthma is they're stuck that way. So they've started that way, and now they're polarized that way. Now, if your immune seesaw is stuck, where your infectious defense is suppressed and your allergic inflammation is high, that's what creates asthma. Even when you get an infection, even when you get an exposure, your body only has one way to respond, and that's allergic inflammation, because it never developed that T helper 1. So if you look at the ratios between cortisol and DHEA, cortisol, if your immune system is stuck and polarized with no T helper 1, too much T helper 2, what cortisol does, or what prednisone does, which is the drug version of cortisol, it just drops the seesaw. It suppresses the immune system, but it doesn't balance out the sides of the seesaw. What that does is it takes the swelling and the inflammation out of the bronchioles and allows you to, and they're usually the little red puffers or the preventatives, what they call them preventative, you're inhaling prednisone to take the swelling out of your lungs. But because what it does is it just drops or suppresses the immune system without fixing up the ratios. That predisposes you to infection. So what happens then is you take the prednisones, it takes away the swelling, but it also switches off your immune system in the process. You then go back out into the real world and you've got an infection. So then they give you antibiotics and that sort of stuff to treat the infections, which wipes out the bacteria that you're trying to build to actually balance out your immune system. So what's interesting about that is we are born predisposed to asthma and eczema. And we need microbiome, we need bugs to challenge our immune system, and we need breast milk and that sort of stuff to support that mucosa and to support those microbiome. So by the ages of 2, we should have established pretty much the what do they call it, the footprint or the fingerprint or whatever, established a profile, a bacteria microbiome profile that we're supposed to carry on for the rest of our life. And that microbiome profile is supposed to come from your mother. It's supposed to come from the mother's skin and the outside of the foods and all that sort of stuff. But if you realise that there's a large section of children getting born C-section, they don't get the mouthful of bugs on the way out. There's a large section of, and this is where
formula.
Yeah, exactly. And Steve-O was mentioning hygiene hypothesis.
Yep.
There are people getting taught to sterilise everything and even leave the bleaches and everything on it to make sure nothing falls on it. So these kids are constantly sterilising. Now we have a microbiome in our lung that has a massive impact on this. And I'll tell you what's really interesting. They found some very interesting links in regards to the microbiome with obesity and also the same microbiome that causes asthma. And guess what? Firmicutes, in particular streptococcus in your throat, they're the ones that are the main contributors of asthma and lung. So a lot of those typical ingredients we've got to regulate in the modbiotics in the gut, right, they can go through and help to regulate a lot of the microbiome that relates to the microbiome in your lungs, because it's actually the microbiome.
Not just your gut.
No. It's the whole way down, pretty much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, except pretty much all the mucous membranes, other than your bladder and your it's just the bladder, really.
There's not many places where there's no bugs. I mean, there's about 2,000 colony-forming units in your lungs, which is about the same amount as in your small intestine.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of bugs there in our lungs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And strep is a bad one. Strep pneumonia actually is the
and if you just made me think of something too. You know how people talk about SIBO? So they talk about small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Yeah.
And that causes mucus and inflammation in through their digestive tract, which causes anything from constipation to diarrhea, which causes constriction of the bowel. It causes mucus production and inflamed mucosa.
Same.
It's exactly the same thing that's happening in the lungs.
Wow.
And now the funny thing is it's all linked with a reflex. So there's every chance that you could be getting these symptoms in your lung. It might be related to a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or vice versa. You could have an alteration in your microbiome in your lungs, and that manifests as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth symptoms.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's papers coming out saying the role of the microbiome in asthma, the gut-lung axis is the title of this paper.
Wow.
I've
never heard of the gut-lung axis.
Oh, it's well known. And
Remember, we did a podcast not long ago. We mentioned the old treatment for ulcerative colitis was smoking. So in the old days, what they used to do is they added mucus to the bowel by irritating the lungs.
Yeah, right.
So what they're realising is that there's this one thing. You can use a fibre. I mean, you can't really eat a fibre into your lungs.
No.
You don't really want to. You want to kind of get the fibre into your bowels. Yeah. But it will, through reflex, will affect your lungs. In fact, in the Gut Right product, we have larch arabinogalactans. One of the things I love about larch arabinogalactans is they are a modbiotic or a prebiotic. When we talk about modbiotics, they're prebiotics, but they're specific prebiotics. They will feed specific bugs and wipe out others. So they're not just a generic prebiotic. But the large arabinogalactans are so cool. There were some papers that come out the other year. It was on a day, though, a few years ago. And what happened in that paper is they ate these fibres. No, but ate them, okay? So when they ate the fibres and it went down through their stomach and in through the digestive tract, they found the larch arabinogalactans making a coating through the lungs, a coating into the tonsils and that sort of stuff, and a coating up into the liver. And in those papers, it showed that it prevented the metastases of cancer to those regions.
Wow. And
so it's kind of cool. I mean, we don't talk about that in much of our data because we don't talk much about cancer and that sort of stuff. But it's a very interesting point because what it was is it was a fibre, basically, that coated membranes and prevented infection. Yeah. And that's the main... That's a big part of the Gut Right.
I've got a good friend of mine at the moment who's just gone in for a second operation with a whole heap of polyps in his bowel.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So... Would something like that help to stop the what do you call it, the metastasization?
Yeah. We'll see with the polyps in the bowel. So what happens there typically is it's your immune system's trying to isolate something, and it creates these weird little isolated little. Well, it's a polyp. It's a weird little thing. They don't really know why they are formed. Do you know much about it?
No, not much.
There's a lot of some people have infections that cause it. Some people have allergic, but it's the same immune little profile.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had some really interesting case studies come back testimonials with the gut writing polyps too. So,
Yeah.
well, it'd be interesting to see. But you see anything across those mucosa.
Topic for another podcast, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I just you mentioned it as a set of friends going through it at the moment. So.
No. So basically, when you have a look at those, using those fibres and controlling the microbiome, if you control the microbiome in through the gut and bowel, through reflex, you're changing the microbiome in your lungs. And if we can control the microbiome in through your tonsils and throat, we can protect your lungs. And interesting, because I mean, another cause of asthma is recurrent tonsillitis and then tonsillectomy, because the next thing that happens is that decides to catch everything in the bronchioles to protect the lungs because they've removed it from here. And
I never knew that until I started working with you. You know, it's like the same thing as the appendix. It's like, it's useless. Cut that bit out. We don't need it. Tonsils, nobody needs them. It's like, actually, no, it's there to filter out the crap.
And in my clinic, my favourite thing for treating tonsillitis was that large arabinogalactans, because they could fill up that little scarred up bucket with fibre that prevents the infections and actually feeds good bugs. And wipes out the strep that causes the asthma. So those ingredients that are in Gut Right, and Steve-O's printed off a little paper here that lists off a whole heap of cool herbs that are really good for asthma as well, and a lot of them are also in the Gut Right. And because what we're finding is a pattern between the same microbiome that we can regulate, that we can regulate the immune system and inflammation.
You're going to put those lists of herbs up on the site?
Sure. We'll talk through them in a
It's just a cheat sheet. There's some science there. Also, we know that you talk about gut bugs and all that sort of thing, and you talked about the bugs actually helping the immune system. We knew that because we found that the people that lived on a farm had vastly lower rates of asthma. And it's like, that's the pollution thingamajig. What we know, it's exposure to the bugs and the dirt and that sort of thing.
Because that's what dirt and dust is. Yeah. Dirt and dust is predominantly dead bugs, skin, and not a lot of skin cells. I mean, that's a lot of it, isn't it? That's what dust and that is.
Well, the best
in
part
your house.
It's like a workout for your immune system.
Yeah, it's exactly like
if you sterilise.
They're dead. They don't infect. And this is the big challenge. So dead bugs, really important for asthmatics, because you want to challenge the immune system build up, but not predisposed to infection.
Have you heard of people who've been allergic to penicillin?
Yes.
Okay, penicillin wipes out the gut bugs, which drives the immune system towards the T helper 2, or the allergic side that you were talking about. The actual allergies to the sulfur-containing things in penicillin is not that high, they found out. It's actually the fact that it changes the gut bugs.
Is that
right? So when someone's allergic to something, it could be there's something causing the allergy.
Yeah.
And, whenever a student would write something in about that, saying, people can be allergic to penicillin, I say, are they allergic to penicillin or the effects of penicillin?
Yeah.
Wiping out the gut bugs.
This is the funny... So when people come into the naturopath clinic and I say, hey, you allergic to anything? And they say sulfur.
Yeah.
And I go, what do you mean sulfur? And I said, you've got a lot inside your body.
Yeah.
And they've just gone, I know I'm allergic to sulfur. And I said, okay, but why? How do you know? Yeah. And they say, no, I had a reaction to an antibiotic.
Okay, and so if they eat onion, they die? What happens? Because
and I'm sitting there going, I can't take sulfur out of your diet and I can't take sulfur out of your body and I can't...
Sulfur's
so they'll be saying, I can't use this supplement because I've read the word sulfate on it or something. And
or
like,
have you ever eaten taurine? Your liver makes taurine, which is a sulfur-based amino acid. Yeah. So, you can't be allergic to sulfur. There's no such thing. Yeah. And so this is problematic. And so you may be allergic to a sulfur-containing antibiotic because it...
affects your microbiome. I never knew that. I thought they just acquired an allergy to the chemical or something that.
That's why penicillin use is associated with asthma.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, one of the things. Of course, there is problems with, as you said, cesarean section. We know that, of course, too. We know, of course, breast and bottle feeding, and we know Clostridia in the gut is associated, and Klebsiella with asthma.
Who gets most of the Klebsiella and Clostridia? Finish my sentence, Steve-O.
who gets most of it?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
people with antibiotics.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I was just about to say, that's the big problem that we had with Corbin. And he didn't get asthma, but he got bad eczema. Because
and it's very similar.
Huge amounts of antibiotics because he tried to come at blooming 25, 26 weeks, like all of our children did. Yeah. But, and so as a result, Tony was just pumped full of so much antibiotics. It's not funny.
Yeah. And so then in that instance, then you want to replenish. But if you have a look at what's available on the market and what's been studied, most of them are just firmicutes, which is okay because there's good and there's bad firmicutes.
Yeah.
So the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium in regards to asthma are kind of cool because they do stimulate the immune system, and in doing so they reduce the allergic inflammation. In particular, the Rhamnosus GG has been shown to be the best at reducing the allergic inflammation. Of the firmicutes that are really bad, it's the Clostridiums, the Strep, E. coli's, those sort of things. So they're the ones that create the obesogenic profile, coincidentally, but also create the allergic profile.
Yeah, it's quite scary.
What's interesting, we mentioned before about cortisol and how cortisol can suppress the immune system, and prednisone is the drug version of that suppresses the immune system, and they use that as an anti-inflammatory. Let me suggest an alternative. Don't not do what your doctor says, okay? And if you are on a course of prednisone for a couple of days, or usually it's only supposed to be 3 days, not 5 years or something.
My mum had the same thing.
Yeah, a couple of days, and then you get off it. Okay, so if you've been told to do that, do that. But for a natural alternative as a preventative, research CLA. Conjugated linoleic acid is absolutely brilliant for mucosal inflammation. Excellent for asthma, excellent for Crohn's and other inflammatory bowel disorders and that sort of stuff as well. But CLA, other claim to fame, is it can stop cortisol from suppressing the immune system and stop cortisol from breaking down muscle and preserving fat. So CLA, if you're on prednisone or on a preventative, you can use the CLA to stop the immune suppression from the preventative drug, but you can also use CLA to take away the swelling in the mucosa. Now, in the ATP product, I don't want to make it a product vlog, but just so you don't rush out and buy the wrong CLA, we use the CLA from the safflower, the one that's naturally occurring, not the one that's made that may be associated with cancers and that sort of stuff. So you look for a good natural form of CLA. Yeah, so Cis 911. So the Cis 911 is a cool one because that's in the safflower. But AMP-V from ATP Science and Orum Oil both contain CLA.
Yeah, right.
And good levels of CLA. Okay, so for example, 2 mils is going to give you over 1 gram of CLA, which is what you typically get into a capsule and that sort of thing. Now, with the Orum Oil, it's more powerful anti-inflammatory because it doesn't have the MCT. So it's got the CLA, it's got the pomegranate seed oil, and it's and hemp seed oil. So very good anti-inflammatory. But the AMP-V has peppermint in it, and peppermint is a surfactant. So for people that have got this tacky, thick, crappy layer of dried, dehydrated phlegm that they cannot move, classic with chronic asthma, classic with emphysema or chronic obstructive airway disorders and that sort of stuff, brilliant for that. The peppermint will take that. It breaks up the surface tension on the phlegm and allows big lumps of things to turn into small lumps of things, which makes it capable to clear. Very interesting. There's a lot of data on VO2 max and oxygen exchange and all those different things. So it's got a lot of really cool properties with it as well.
What about emphysema, Matt? Would it also help with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because,
and you don't need the mega dose. The funny thing is with a peppermint, a little bits often is good. So cystic fibrosis, like my mate Jack Dyson, we sent him some. He reckons it helps in that. The old lady next door to me that's got emphysema, she just takes, she got confused when I said 1 or 2 mils and that she's taken 1 or 2 drops. But she just, 1 or 2 drops. But that's enough for her she just takes that really frequently. And then she's been going back to doctors and her breathing, the gas exchange significantly better.
That's fantastic.
And Jack, he reckons it helps a little bit just break up that crap. Another interesting thing, while we're talking about both of those cases, we had a podcast the other week talking about detoxification. We talked a lot about cytochrome P450 systems, which I'm not going to talk a huge amount about now because you can go back and listen to that one. But cytochrome P450s are our first line of defense against toxins. Okay, against pollutants and against inhalants and that sort of stuff. People think they're associated with the liver usually, but people need to understand they are all over your body, in particular through your lungs. And what their job is to make fat-soluble toxins water-soluble so that they can get put back into your mucus where you get either vomiting, diarrhea, frothing at the mouth, coughing, spitting, and to clear it away that way. So also people can research into these cytochrome P450s, and you'll find a lot of antioxidants that slow down the cytochrome P450s have also got a great reputation for taking the water out of the lungs. Okay, so things like turmerics and the green teas and other antioxidants, astragalus, ginsengs, those sort of things, very powerful at taking away the phlegm out of these things because they slow down the cytochrome P450s and stop your body from constantly making water that dumps into your lungs and into your mucosa.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? And you got to remember that asthma's been around for so many years. It's actually BC. The first person to describe it was actually Homer. Can you believe that?
Really?
The poet Homer, not the yellow Homer. No, not the yellow guy on TV.
I was so impressed then. I was like, are you serious? I had no idea Simpson had been going that long.
He
was Bart 8 then as well?
Lisa's 8, Bart's 10. See, I used to watch Simpson.
No, other way around, isn't it?
You reckon?
Yeah, she's older than him.
You reckon?
Yeah, he's 8, she's 10.
Oh, can we bet something on that? Because I love The Simpsons.
She's older, isn't she?
I don't know.
No, Lisa's younger.
I don't know.
Lisa's
I don't
8.
watch it.
Man, I actually took a copy of a meme today
Gee.
from The Simpsons where Bart's sitting and going, "Oh, this is the worst day of my life," and Homer's going, "No, son, the worst day of your life so far."
He's always
Genius.
well. The original Homer was a poet as well. That's who he was.
That's
a
why
Greek
they named
poet.
him after him.
Yeah, and he
with his
described the word
philosophy.
pant. But can I take you back to 1500s?
Hang on, before you leave this, I just got my favourite quote from Homer, and I always get it wrong and get it mixed up. It's like, just because I don't care doesn't mean I don't understand. It's probably one of the best quotes I've ever heard. Anyway.
It's funny, the early treatment, and this makes me laugh, but there is actually a bit of ute in this, was, believe it or not, in 1500s they used to give them herbs, makes sense, and human excrement.
Oh.
Human fecal, animal
microbiome
fecal
transfer.
animal fecal matter was a treatment for
That's
asthma.
amazing.
So they gave them bacteria which normalised that immune system. And that's
Wow.
1500s.
Geez, when I was a kid, they put me in a bloody humidity tent with a TV on the other side of the humidity tent, by the way. So you sit there with
Good luck
a
watching
fogged up
that.
screen and turn the TV on, and then you're like, right,
And
this is going to be awesome.
the other treatment was enemas they found useful. So
Oh,
they
right.
flushed the gut out.
Yeah, right.
So and so that got rid of the...
So again, it's all
Clostridium.
microbiome
It is.
and
Wow.
reflex through the
They're doing that in
mucosa.
1500.
1500s. That
That's
was
crazy, yeah.
Herberus Parus, which is a famous
And did
book
it,
from 15.
did it improve?
It improved. That's what they observed.
Wow.
Those things.
That's cool,
Herbs,
man.
yes, makes sense. Enemas, which
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And giving them animal fecal matter. I was going
Yeah.
to say the S word, but we can't.
Oh.
Because it gives them bacteria. Which
I was trying to think of all these different S words then.
Oh, just the one, the animal excrement S
Would
word.
relate to. Yeah, right.
So it's crazy. And another early physician said, let's put it down to, it's feathers being in people's bed. And there's an element of truth there.
It's true.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
allergens. Well, that's what
Yeah.
sets off my nephew is dogs.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't go anywhere near dogs.
Well, I had, when I was growing up, because I grew up in Mackay, but there was a lot of cane farming and that sort of stuff, and
Yeah.
a lot of flowering cane everywhere they believed was a major cause for it as well. But we had these like woven, woven baskets that they make in Fiji and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My carpet was that. It was like these woven squares of stuff that covered my floor. Wow. It wasn't carpet, it was like some weird stuff, like them weird hats you buy and stuff. Anyway, found out that was a major trigger for me, full of mold and all that sort of stuff. So, everyone, you got to find your trigger, but look for things that stimulate the allergic response. Now, what's interesting, in countries where they have endemic populations of major problems of parasite infestation, India and those other places, they have the lowest rates of asthma. So where they have the highest rates of parasites, now parasites are supposed to stimulate the humoral defence or the allergic defence, but what they find is if you actually colonise good level of bugs and parasites early and they become part of your commensal microbiome, your body develops T helper 2 humoral immune responses to protect you from the parasites that also protects you from asthma. But what they find is in other countries where you get the parasite infestation later, it can aggravate asthma. So what happens is if you haven't established this nice balance and the parasitic infestation occurs, or if your commensal parasites overgrow due to immune suppression and that sort of stuff, or feeding them, then that can trigger an asthma attack as well. So it's crazy.
amazing.
We need that nice microbiome, and this is also where yeast can also be protective, because yeast has the ability to go from a single cell organism into a multi-cell organism, where it goes from triggering T helper 1 immune response to modulating our T helper 2 defense. So it's kind of really cool. But we're talking about brewer's yeast, baker's yeast, Saccharomyces and that sort of stuff, because if they aren't there, then you can get candida and you can get exposure to mold, and that can trigger asthma. So it's an interesting link. But let's talk about some treatments, or what else? You got some cool stuff. I'll just keep waffling again.
Look, there's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, the million-dollar questions is, one of them is, why does it happen in the morning and at night?
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's still a bit of a mystery, but you hit on it before with the temperature drop at night usually, because cold, you've got inside your lungs here, you've got smooth muscle tissue. There's 3 types of muscle tissue: cardiac, skeletal, and smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is particularly sensitive to cold. You have other areas of your body with smooth muscle, and I hate to bring it up, but it's the penis. And so that's why cold affects the penis and you get shrinkage. Not me, but everyone else. You know what I mean? So
This is already small. That's why.
That's right.
You don't notice it. But the women, smooth muscles
I'm not
also through the
touching- hey, you know
reproductive
what?
tract
It
and the
is.
bowel. So the bowel,
I'm not touching that, Steve.
the bowel.
You don't have to touch it,
the
mate.
bowel, the reproductive tract, and the lungs. And this is why you'll see patterns
Yes.
with things that relax the bowel. And a lot of the herbs that help female period pain are often the things that also help the lungs.
Yep, and that's why you often get
Beetroot.
Beetroot.
Beetroot's
say
on
it.
blood.
Don't say-
Beetroot stops the bleeding.
Well, the smooth muscles, and because they constrict night, that's why you get most of the heart attacks in the morning.
Yeah.
If you ever wonder why people die of heart attacks in the morning more than other times
Now,
of the
I
day.
always thought
was
the
because
link
blood
was the
was in
low
their penis.
cortisol.
Yeah, and then it spikes in the morning.
So you get through the early dark parts of the morning, when you're in deep sleep, your cortisol is at its lowest.
Lowest, yeah.
Which means inflammation and immune activity is
that's
at
the
its
other reason.
highest. Which means while your cortisol's low, we can fill up with phlegm. And because there's nothing to really stop the immune system from doing that. And what were you saying there, Steve-O? What is the other thing?
The heart
The
attack thing.
circulation thing.
Yeah, the smooth muscles in the feed the arteries that feed the heart, the
Yeah.
coronary arteries they're called.
Yeah.
They become very constrictive and very reactive in that time. And so when they're already mostly blocked, let's say,
Yeah.
and you get some constriction there and it blocks the blood supply to the heart, and
Yeah.
you get a heart attack. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
right. And if you combine that with extra inflammation,
Yep.
that'll make the blood gluggy and that sort of
And
stuff.
make the
And the
plaque
bronchioles
rupture.
constrict and that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's early morning. The other thing we have to know about asthma is that it's caused by different things. And it's a little bit tricky because you can get eosinophils migrating into the bronchioles, which cause asthma. And you can also get a neutrophil type asthma. And this is where different medications have to work for different things.
Let me break it down for the people. Neutrophil in response to infection.
Yep.
So you might get some people say, I never get asthma unless I get the flu.
Yes.
And if you're one of those people, then you're looking at neutrophil infiltration issues. If you're talking about eosinophils, then we're talking about ESR is a good marker on the blood test and that sort of stuff to look for your degree of inflammation. But eosinophils are often associated with allergic inflammation, and they will drive up that. So in those sort of people, you'll find that, I have a food and then I've reacted, I'm full of phlegm. Or every time I eat, my throat feels like it's swelling up or something like that. So that's one way of telling. And also it's the eosinophil group that are more predisposed to have asthma and eczema. Okay, there's the link there.
Absolutely.
Where the other people that say, no, it's only if I get an infection that my body overreacts with. It always, these people say, if I get a cough, it goes to my lungs. Yeah. And I say, every time I get this thing, it always goes to my lungs. So they're the people more predisposed to the neutrophil infiltration into the lungs. And for the neutrophil infiltration, that's where your CLAs and your anti-inflammatories, your turmerics. And so we got a product called Resilience that's got the frankincense, myrrh, and turmeric or gold and that, and they are the best ways, and Ganoderma, they're the best ways to regulate neutrophil infiltration.
They are.
But for eosinophil and other things like mast cell degranulation, that's when we're looking at bioflavonoids and anti-allergic herbs. Is that right,
To
Steve?
stabilise the mast cells. Because what happens in the body is you've got these cells called antigen-presenting cells, and they present antigens to the immune system and said, this is what we're dealing with, guys. And then you get either TLP1, TLP2, or TLP17, whatever coming up to treat the thing. Now, if it's an allergen, the TLP2s come out, secretes chemical messengers called interleukins, and that's like interleukin 4, 5, and 13 for asthma. So there's lots of drugs that target those, and they actually degranulate the mast cells to release histamine. Histamine causes vasodilation. It makes the blood vessels in the lungs become leaky to secrete mucus, to get rid of the thing. It's not to kill you, it's to get rid of the allergen in your lungs. That's what it's there for, so you can cough it up, or in your bowels to shit it out.
Can I explain a little bit more about that?
Go
Because there
for
was
it.
a lot of big words
Yeah,
and
big
stuff in
words.
there. So what you're looking at with the immune cells, Steve was talking about these mast cells and that sort of stuff, which are part of our allergic inflammation. When he said degranulates, it's so cool. Get onto Google and do like live blood microscopy or HemoView or something like that, and then write mast cell degranulation. It looks so cool. What happens? You get these eosinophils that look like aliens and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, with little spots in
and they tell the mast cells to go around and blow bubbles everywhere, pretty much.
Pretty much.
And it looks so cool because you get these mast cells, and what they do is on their cell membrane, they just start forming these bubbles, and then they just and release all these bubbles. And each one of those bubbles is like histamine. And then the funny thing, they go through and activate an allergic response, which drags all these other immune cells there, which then degranulate and release more histamine. And as we know, histamine makes you scratch and itch, triggers flushing reactions. So it's going to try to flush the membranes with mucus, flush the bowels with mucus, make you scratch, make you itch. And that's why some people, the other way of knowing if you've got that allergic style asthma, you just get that stupid, annoying, itchy nose, or the roof of your mouth will itch or something like that. And you'll feel those histamine-style reactions. So a lot of the treatments for it, like for my favourite ones, like there's a herb called Perilla frutescens, which we grow as a salad herb. It's used a lot through Asian and Vietnamese cuisine just as a salad herb. 90% inhibition of mast cell degranulation. I mean, after 1 month of using this stuff, and it works out to be about 4 or 5 leaves of this thing a day. You don't have to do mega doses. 90% stabilised mast cells, so they release only 10% of the histamine that they would have released without it. Very cool. And that's where bioflavonoids like quercetin, rutin, luteolin is the active ingredient in Perilla, and that's a bioflavonoid. And they all stabilise these mast cells and stop the release of this. There's a lot of data now coming out with mastocytosis or mast cell degranulation disorders, and a lot of these people now are rewording allergy to mast cell disorders.
Yes.
It's the same treatment. You just stabilise the mast cells, make them tougher so they don't release as much histamine. The alternative is let them release histamine and then try to block histamine receptors all over the body with antihistamines or anti-allergy medication.
That's what the Clarentines are, for example.
But what's the problem? The side effect of using an antihistamine in an asthma is it dries out the mucosa. And the asthmatics need some moisture in the air to be able to absorb the oxygen out of it. Otherwise, they get bronchial constriction because, as you've seen, you know when we have our compressors down in the factory there and you see the water that builds up? So as they're compressing air, it's creating this water. So that's what our lungs try to do to actually improve the oxygen exchange with a bit of moisture.
Well, what's the other issue, Matt, with having too much of your antihistamines all the time? Because there's quite a lot of side effects.
Well, a couple of things. The body does things for a reason. Yeah. So if your body's out there releasing histamine in response to an allergy, it's doing that because it thinks it's part of your survival response.
Exactly.
You can also release histamine as part of a stress reaction. Histamine's recruited as part of our survival. It makes us more alert and energetic arousal, which is why a side effect of antihistamine is drowsiness. Because antihistamines wake you up. So the body recruits them. And so what happens is if you go around blocking histamine receptors everywhere and the body's releasing histamine but not seeing the result of that, the only way it can compensate is by releasing more histamine. Plus, you've got the side effects then of receptor downregulation, which then the body responds by making more histamine receptors. So the end result of constant use of antihistamines is the reliance on antihistamines. So rather than doing a histamine blocking campaign, you do a histamine, you block the release of histamine, and that way you can actually, it just works better. You don't have the side effects, you don't have drowsing, and you're treating the cause. And then what you want to do is work on modulating that immune system. So that way, when your immune system is exposed to an allergen or exposed to an infection, your body is not responding with allergic inflammation. It's responding with the appropriate immune defense to kill the thing off. The problem is if you're one of those people that suffered from childhood asthma and you're polarized and stuck into that position, you only have one, you've never really matured a proper way of defending against infection. Your body's just decided, okay, last time this happened, I flushed it away with an allergic response and I survived. We'll just do that again. So it's a bit of a challenge to actually educate the immune system to use different strategies, which is why it's so important to go in with herbs and things that force change. Like things like bioflavonoids and that sort of stuff, they make sure they're stable, the mast cells are stable, but they don't force change with the immune. So that's what I love about herbs. And so with the herbs, if we look at it, things like garlic and all that sort of stuff, very powerful antimicrobials, but they also stimulate the immune system while they suppress the allergies. If we run through those herbs on your list there, Steve, some of them, my favourite, well, let me tell you my old recipes for asthma from my clinic, because don't forget, I've had asthma my whole life, and this is the reason why I become a naturopath. And I don't have asthma now. I don't have it. Like sometimes I do because I'm unfit. So let me tell you about the herbs that I used to use. So lots of CLA, lots of luteolin, but the luteolin supplements are too bloody expensive, like really expensive and relatively high dose. Luteolin, look it up, Perilla frutescens. Go to your local hardware store. I bet you see it there. It's a velvety, fluffy leaf thing. You only need to eat half a dozen leaves a day in a salad or on a sandwich or in your Vietnamese would do it in their rice paper rolls or in amongst all their other salads and that sort of stuff. And that gives you the luteolin active. And we grow it. It's very susceptible to insects, and it's hard to grow sometimes. We tend to buy a lot of it because even though we grow it, it's just hard to keep it going. So luteolin's brilliant. Most of the ingredients in Gut Right, all the like weird stuff in Gut Right, the cranberries and the cinnamons and the pomegranates and all those sort of things have been shown to work along the same lines. And then with our resilience product, with the frankincense, myrrh and the reishis and that, they've got the ability to modulate the immune system and force change. But for symptom relief, I'll quickly tell you, because one of my favourites was Grindelia. Grindelia is a herb, and what Grindelia does, it's a beta agonist. Okay, so Grindelia works like Ventolin. Okay, so Grindelia you can put in and it opens up the bronchioles. All right, Grindelia, you just got to be careful not to go too heavy on handed with it, because it does have the same side effects as Ventolin when you're taking it orally, meaning that it'll make the heart race. So you just get the Grindelia and it opens up the bronchioles. Elecampane is one of my other... Now, Elecampane's used if you get the tacky phlegm in the bottom of the lungs. Okay, so Elecampane breaks up old, crappy... It's a very good expectorant, but specific for the lower lung. All right, so if you've got old emphysemas and catarrh and chronic stuff and you're coughing up stupid colours and horrible flavours and things like that, that's when you use the Elecampane. Thyme is a really good antiseptic. Very good antimicrobial. It'll sterilise and kill infection in the mucus that before it, like strep and that sort of stuff. So if you're getting a regular habit of using thyme, it'll sterilise a lot of these bad bugs and stop the infection in through the lungs.
I love that. It heals a broken heart too.
If you have a look under the TGA list, that's pretty funny actually. I just got it.
Yeah.
If you have a look at the TGA list, they're all crap because you've got Zambucus and you've got Ivy. And both of those things are, one of them's an expectorant, which is a Zambucus, and the other one's a cough suppressant. So you pretty much...
Sambuca?
Zambucus nigro, which is black elderberries.
Black elderberries,
like what they make the alcohol from.
Yeah, if you like it. I went camping with a bottle of Ouzo once. I still can't touch this stuff, eh?
Speaking of TGA list, what about coltsfoot? That's poisoned by the Australian government.
But it's allowed on TGA products?
No.
Goldenrod, isn't it? What's it? Solidago or something? Coltsfoot was good, and I used to did a fair bit of research at that one stage because it was smoked by the American Indians for airway inflammation. Yeah. So they used to smoke this herb to get it into the lungs to do it. Well, speaking about smoking herbs, the myrrh. The frankincense and myrrh is what they put in there was a tradition there wherever you get big groups of people to prevent infection, they would smoke frankincense and myrrh through the areas because it gets into the fabric of clothing, it can get into the wood, it can get into the walls, it can get into anything anyone touches, including their lungs and their airways. So actually smoking, or not smoking it, but burning frankincense and myrrh in the house as an inhalation. You can do that. You can walk and shake it at your mate and that sort of stuff. Or you walk down the aisle and a bit for you, a bit for you.
I love
that. That's what they do.
Yeah.
I've been there.
That's good. Yeah. And what about food? You want to talk quickly about foods? Because I know we're running a bit out of time.
Bugger the time. We can make it work. We're going to edit some stuff out.
There's some good research on foods that are very good for that. Yeah, this is from a great study. Basically, the two things that have been shown, this is hardly surprising, but fruits and vegetables are highly protective against asthma in kids and adults. Yeah. So that's very good. So is vitamin D.
And dairy's worst.
Yeah, dairy is a train wreck. And so is a lot of grains and gluten are very bad for the mucus. And
colours and preservatives, because they're not natural to us. So the chemical ones, our body just goes, I don't know what this is, just flush it away. Tartrazines. And that'll respond. Tartrazine's the worst. Yellow was a killer for me. That to this day, the one thing that'll still trigger an asthma attack is cordial. If I touch cordial... it's instant. So you get the sugars and you get the colour, the bronchial. For me, I can induce an asthma by just having a cordial.
When I was really young, and I never suffered from asthma, but I used to get this incredible itching on my neck and chest area. I think it might have been in the lungs from drinking a Maison, like a non-alcoholic wine.
Never heard of it. You deserve it.
It was like an apple pie, but it had
glass yourself.
It had a lot of sulfate in it. So I think that was then reacting to me to the point where I'd drink it and literally I'd be itching my chest.
If I had Brown Brothers, I go bright red splotchy instantly. It's the one I can't touch it. There's some preservative or something in it.
It doesn't agree with you.
Doesn't. And so my sister.
It's funny because I've had arthritis and all that sort of thing, so I've got a different immune system. I am allergic to nothing. Nothing's ever caused a rash on me and all that sort of thing. So that's because
you
my
get
immune
autoimmune.
system.
Hang on.
Yeah.
But if you have a look at these herbs, so Steve mentioned some foods, but you just have a look at this recipe you've just provided me here.
Oh, it's just a simple thing.
Well, these are the studied herbs for treating asthma, but if you have a look at it, as far as recipes go, you've got turmeric, garlic, lemongrass, ginger, where's these others? Oh, there's none of your shitty list. Oregano, thyme, lemongrass.
Yeah, they're all good.
They're all the sort of things that you can put into your food and actually have an anti-asthma properties. And as long as you're keeping the dairies out, you get away from a lot of the grains that can contribute to leaky gut walls and inflammation.
Absolutely.
That's it. Oh, well, we mentioned that word, leaky gut wall. And this is one of the gut links is, if you get a leaky gut wall, now the causes of leaky gut wall is inflammation, allergic, nutrient deficiencies, zinc deficiency is probably the worst
D
one.
deficiency,
Those sort of things create a leakiness of the gut wall. What that means is the holes in the mucosa open. What that means is before things get broken down into their tiniest particles through digestion, they're capable of being absorbed. Now, when it's absorbed in a large particle, it's too large for the immune system to engulf and remove, so it triggers a flushing reaction. So the link between leaky gut wall and asthma is that with inflammation, with constant inflammation that contributes to the leaky gut wall. The leaky gut wall allows more antigens, which Steve mentioned before, to get through, and antigens are just fractions of things, broken down bits of an allergen or a pollen or a bacteria or something like that. So it goes in and says, hey, this is the stuff that's coming through. But with the leaky gut wall, you get so much of that. There's an aspect of our immunity we didn't really talk about, which is oral tolerance, which is our ability to have a little bit of everything and not react. Well, if you've got a leaky gut wall, there's no such thing as low dose exposure. Everything comes through in a high dose. And then the body can't afford to wait to see what it is, or can't afford to say, just chill, it's no big deal. It's actually going, man, this is potentially an infection. Let's hit it. And then if your immune system's predisposed to allergic inflammation only, then it says an immune challenge, flush, bronchoconstriction, allergic inflammation. So we've listed off a few herbs that you can sip on all day as a tea. You can put them into your breakfast, lunches and dinners. So we're getting those things. You can incorporate the gut right, the resilience. You can play around with Orem oil and Amp V. Definitely try Amp V if you're predisposed to sport-induced asthma. The other product, this is going to sound a little bit weird, sport-induced asthma may also be respiratory acidosis. Okay, it may not necessarily be an inflammation and a bronchoconstriction. If you get too much acid, then what happens is your body needs to pant that acid out. It needs to get the acid out before it lets you to take a nice deep breath. We fix that with magnesium, and the best herb for that is Schisandra. We have a product called Infrared that's based on magnesium and Schisandra, and one of the best feedback we get is it actually reduces respiratory acidosis. I don't even have to make a claim on sports-induced asthma because it doesn't fix sport-induced asthma. It fixes respiratory acidosis, and by that means you don't pant during exercise. And in that one study they did on Schisandra on racehorses, or in one of the studies they did on Schisandra and racehorses, it improved their time in an 800-metre race by 6 lengths by buffering the respiratory acidosis.
Look, and the funny thing is for me, I mean, again, soccer's tragic. Discovered it in my 40s and absolutely love it. Already hitting the pavement, doing pre-season.
It's awesome.
The products that I'll be using are Amp before the game, and I'll be loading up and then using through the game the Infrared. Because those two products, seriously, I keep going when everybody else is starting to fade away. And I don't train as hard as some of the other guys as far as you know running and what have you. But it definitely makes a massive difference.
Well, the respiratory acidosis, for the people that don't know what that is, when carbon dioxide reacts with water, it forms an acid called carboxylic acid. So breathing out the CO2 can turn that back to water, if that makes sense. I won't draw the chemical thing, but basically that's what acidosis is. CO2 levels in your body trigger breathing rates. That's the chemical that triggers how much
it creates
you breathe.
the same sort of symptoms though. The difference is you don't have the big production of phlegm. So what happens is you just shut, and that's a weird one because it's not that. It's funny because it's like you find yourself doing catch-up breaths. You find yourself sighing, but if you're predisposed to respiratory acidosis because you sigh a lot. You sigh, you pant out, and then you're doing these regular catch-up breaths, which we're all doing right now. Is that? Well, so basically, and you'll know with respiratory acidosis because what it is that you find yourself panting and shallow breathing all the time. And then having to take a nice deep breath to catch up. But you don't have that bronchial constriction. You just got panting. And that can lead to hyperventilation, and then they'll say, oh, geez, you've had an asthma attack on the sporting field.
Yeah.
But you can buffer the acid and it doesn't happen.
So for asthmatics, using something like the AMP and the infrared would be fantastic. For people that aren't, let's say if you're training and you're trying to improve your VO2 max and your fitness, should you use infrared and AMP before training, or should you train without it so it's harder, and then when you use it in the game?
That's a million-dollar question.
That's the whole concept of all these low carbs. What you want to do is you want to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. You want to get better and better at producing energy from bugger all energy.
Yeah.
And you want to do that pretty much through your training.
Yeah.
And often you'd want to do it through your whole season if you wanted to perform for one particular event, because you want to force yourself to struggle. You want to force yourself to be terrible in performance and allow your body to adapt back to normal. But then when you load up with your carbs, normal. You go beyond normal.
Superman.
Yeah, so it's like, I always look at it, those baseball guys, they have the weight on the bat and they're going around, and then they go, right, let's take the weight off and whack.
So if I wanted to perform every Friday night, which I don't often shine.
Just do infrared and amp, because you
just on that day.
Yeah.
But what about the loading? You know what this is?
So if you're going low carb, we'll do another episode on performance
carb loading. Yeah,
but just quickly to answer your question, because there's some people might be sitting there going, just answer the bloody thing.
Yeah.
Your glycogen reserves are going to take 24 hours, 48 hours to replenish fully.
Yep.
So if you've been going low carb all week and training and you've depleted your glycogen, then you need to replenish those in the days leading up to your event. Because the infrared, the sugars that you take pre-event, it's only going to your blood.
Probably
it's not going to regenerate glycogen.
Because I play on Friday night, so probably starting maybe even breakfast on the Thursday.
Yeah, or lunch. Yeah, but basically Thursday night. You could do Thursday night and Friday high carb.
Yep.
And then you're going to reload all your glycogen, have ample carbs. Then the infrared that you add in pre-event's only going to go to your bloodstream. It's not going into your muscle.
Yep.
So then it will actually maintain your nerves and your brain and your those sort of things.
And then amp it at the same time, but don't use the amp through the rest, because I use it for fasted cardio if I'm doing low carb or ketogenic to actually help with burning body fat.
Well, you got to realise amp's very interesting, because it depends if you're in a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus, whether it's a performance enhancer or a fat burner. So it only drives those fat loss aspects and those ketogenic pathways in a calorie deficit, and in particular in a carb deficit,
which I am.
or a glycogen deficit. So it'll drive those processes then. Once you've reloaded and you use AMP, all of a sudden you get those massive effects on performance. Remember the studies, 35% increase in grip strength, 13% standing box jump, 10% high jump. So all of those skills of grabbing that guy by the nuts and then jumping over him will be benefited with peppermint.
Hang on, this is not Saturday nights. This is Friday night football.
No, well, I'm trying to relate the data. I'm trying to relate the data of peppermint to your chosen sport. So increase grip strength by 35%. I've seen soccer players grab the squirrel. And then the next one's a standing box jump.
Which are headers.
Huh?
Headers.
Oh, yep. Or jumping over someone that's rolling around on the ground in pain.
Faking it.
And then standing long jump was the other one. So you can then, when someone almost touches your leg, you can just jump all the way over there and then roll around on the ground like Neymar. I played soccer most of my life, and it really bloody hurts getting kicked in the shins. I'm only giving you shit about it because I know I can. And Neymar's not going to be
what
complaining.
I'd love to do is I'd actually love to do a performance podcast. So I'd love some FAQs to come in depending on your type of sport in terms of
well, that's a good idea.
Nutrients,
specific for sports,
different
and
types of sports.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in Australia we're coming into football season, so that's AFL, rugby union, rugby league, football, soccer in Australia and in the US. Sorry, our English friends.
I don't even think we do soccer in Australia.
What?
I've just been watching the Asia Cup.
It's terrible. No, actually, I think I actually think I was. I got a call up.
No,
I could. I probably could.
Well, no, actually, the funny thing is, you look at the statistics, and we actually really do really, really well when it comes to shots on goals, when it comes to crosses, when it comes to possession.
Can't finish that.
We just can't put it in the back of the net.
No, we bloody can't.
That's the whole goal of the game, literally, isn't it?
Yeah,
to get it in.
Pun, Steve.
Yeah, that's it. I remember that guy. Is that guy still commentating?
All of them, Steve, go, goal!
Oh, do they?
Yeah, but the thing is, the English don't. They're far more refined than that. Thank you very much. They don't go goal like the South Americans and that do.
Oh. Well, what do they do?
They go, oh, that was a marvellous goal. Anyway,
you want your shoes shine, governor?
So anyway, let's do a podcast on performance,
specifically for sport.
But also, let's do one on low carb too.
Let's
show people how to do the low carb thing for performance.
Real low
definitely
carb.
Peppermint. I mean, we can talk about things like the beta alanine, which is fantastic. Creatine as well too. The importance of that. yeah, anyway, that'll be a great podcast.
It will be.
Yeah. Yes.
Guys, that's all that we've got time for today. We're going to come back with a performance podcast, which I love.
I love it.
You know, it's all about me. I just want to get better at football. Well, thanks for everyone for writing in. We'll be back next week with a performance podcast, so let's do it.
Oh, we have to now.
We've
Yeah.
dobbed in.
Yeah.
And I can show you a few things, Steve.
Great, I need that.
And that's it from me.
And that's it from him.
That's it from
That's
me.
it, Ronnie.
See you guys.
The two Ronnies.
Yeah.
Hooroo.
Hooray.
Hooroo.
I hear the rattle in my bronchi.
Leaving you breathless.
You like that?
Oh.
What's that from?
Why would you?
Afternoons, they'll be measured out.
I can't
Measured
understand
out,
what the
measured
fuck.
with coffee spoons. I'll wear pajamas in the daytime.